Hey everybody, Spiral here, talking about thermaling today in Microsoft Flight Simulator. See a lot of people online saying that it's really difficult to thermal, and if you really want the best experience of gliding in Flight Simulator, that your best option is for ridge running. Now, I'm not going to disagree with the general sentiment. Ridge running, ridge soaring is much better modeled in Microsoft Flight Simulator, but it is possible to thermal. And I want to point out what I do that will allow me to thermal and have a lot of fun doing thermal flying in Microsoft Flight Simulator. As you can see, I'm in the Discus 2C. This is the freeware plane from Got Friends. I'll have the link in the description. And it is a joy to fly. If you're not familiar with gliders, it's a great first glider. It's not an ideal first glider because it's somewhat advanced, but as advanced fiberglass gliders go, the Discus 2C is a pretty gentle introduction. There's no flaps, so you don't have to worry about all that the flaps entail. Now, I'm in Flight Simulator 2020 right now because I think, and I'm going to spare you the rant, I think the gliding experience is much better in 2020 than 2024. You can think what you want. If you want to do 2024, you knock yourself out. Everything I'm going to show you today applies to 2024 as well. So it doesn't matter really which simulator you prefer to fly in. I think the better experience is in 2020. I'm waiting for SU3 to come out like everybody else. It's supposed to get a lot better, but everything I read about 2024, and I own it, don't get me wrong, contains the word bug or waiting for a fix or SU3. All right, that's fine, but for my purposes, what I like to do in a simulator when I sit down at my rig is to fly, and I want to fly and have fun. I don't want to beat my head against a yoke, so I fly in 2020 and I fly with conditions that I set that make it enjoyable for me. Now, I'm not a CFI, I'm not a flight simmer in the way, I'm not a pro gliding pilot. You know what I mean? I am a person who really enjoys flying, and I have had some real life experience. I've had a few hours, like 30 hours of flying in a glider, and I have soloed, but I don't have my license. I'm not a CFIG. So what I say is not expert stuff, and the experts out there may differ with some of the things I have to say. I'm just showing you what I do to have a good experience thermaling in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So I start in 2020, and I'm choosing the Discus 2C because it's a freeware glider that anybody can try out and find and enjoy. So there you go. Just quickly, I have spawned and taken off, just detached from the tow plane with a 2000 AGL tow from the Wilga tow plane that I use, and I'm in Kilo Delta November Alpha, the Santa Teresa Airport, or as it's legally called, is the Doña Ana County Airport. And it's in Santa Teresa, New Mexico, which is in the extreme southern part of New Mexico. And it's more identified with El Paso, Texas, far, far, far west Texas, than it is New Mexico. But that's all right. That's where the Soaring Club that I learned to fly is. This is where I grew up, and it's the area that I'm the most familiar with. And obviously, as you can see flying around, I'm in multiplayer and active pause as well. So let's talk about thermaling and how you do it. Thermaling in Microsoft Flight Simulator is not that hard. It's not that big a deal. Of course, thermaling is weather dependent. So let's go to the weather settings, and I'll show you what I normally start with. Now, this SSC weather preset that we're looking here is weather preset number 62. And look, guys, I'm just going to tell you straight up, your flying experience is going to be the best if you start with these weather presets. The weather presets that the Soaring Sim Club put together, the SSC presets, are over 120, I believe it is. You can see how many there are as I scroll through the list. They're organized by cloud type, and then within each cloud type, they give you 2 wind velocities at every compass rose point. It's beautiful. At the end, you get some shifting wind conditions, and of course, they even give you some thermal conditions, weak thermals and strong thermals. Now, I don't use those weak and strong thermal presets very much. I've tried them, they're fine. But what I normally do is I pick a wind direction, which is what 99% of people that get into the simulator that want not live weather, and I don't recommend using live weather. It's what they want when they sit in the sim. They pick a wind direction and then they set it and go flying. Well, I think the Sim Soaring presets, which I will provide a link to in the website, I did not create these. These were created by the Sim Soaring Club. Georg and his group have done a great piece of work. These are free. You have to put them in the right folder in your flight simulator installation, which is in the app data. It's not that hard to do. The website that I'm linking where you can download these from flightsim.to tells you how and where to put the flight simulator, where the weather files in your flight simulator installation, depending on whether you're doing it on Steam or from the Xbox store. These are the best way to fly, and not just soaring, but to give yourself any kind of soaring success. So let me show you how to do these and how I use these soaring presets to go thermal flying. So if I choose, for example, this soaring preset, I like this one right here for thermal flying. It's SSC3077. So it gives me scattered clouds, winds at 6,000, and out of the west at 10 knots. Now, why do I choose 10 knots and not 15 knots? Well, 10 knots, excuse me, 10 knots and 15 knots, if you're going to thermal, you prefer less wind because more wind, the thermals will go straight up. If higher wind velocity will tend to move the thermals faster, and it tends to cause the thermals to break up, and it generates sink as well as lift, at least in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, you can argue as long as you want about how Microsoft measures and models thermals. It's not perfect, but it's acceptable, and you can have a lot of fun thermal soaring. So I'm going to choose the SSC 77 preset. Now, it did change my weather a little bit, and I'll show you as we look around. Got rid of a lot of clouds, but there's still plenty of clouds there. If you're going to go thermaling, you really want to have clouds. You can't thermal in clear skies. It's just not possible. Well, it is possible, but it's much harder to find thermals. Thermals are a result of the sun warming the ground. The hot air from that warm ground rises, and as that column of air hits the dew point temperature up in the altitude, up in the atmosphere, the cloud condenses, the water vapor condenses into clouds. It's pretty classic weather, and yes, I'm not a meteorologist, so I'm gonna defer to those for a better, more accurate explanation, but that's basically what a cloud is. So in Flight Simulator, we want a scattered cloud condition, and I'm choosing the one that has the least amount of wind, so the 10 knot over the 15 knot variant, and I'm picking them out of the west, so that happens to be number 77. Now, there are 3 things to change in order to guarantee yourself excellent and still realistic thermaling conditions. The first is your date. You want to pick a date in the summertime. Now, I happen to be recording this on the last day of July, summertime in North America, so I'm okay with the date. I don't need to change it. But if I'm flying in South America or the Southern Hemisphere, I want to make sure to change the date to November, December, January, or February, because that's when their summer is. Now, more importantly, and very critically, you need to understand that in Microsoft Flight Simulator, thermals are time dependent. They really start to ramp up from 1 p.m. local to 4 p.m. local. And so we're going to kick that up a little bit, and you can notice how the clouds tend to sharpen up a little bit, and the shadows tend to sharpen up a little bit between 1 and 4. Right. And you can also see them moving as I do that too. They're not moving very fast, but they're moving. So set your local time to between 1 and 4, depending on how long you want to fly. Now, after 4, you can still find thermals. It's just that they will decrease in intensity. So if you're doing a long cross country, you're going to want to know that, because it's going to be harder to find lift after 4 p.m. because Flight Simulator is modeling the lift less strongly. Everything else stays the same. This is the weather preset from the Sim Soaring Club. All I've changed is the date. In this case, I didn't need to, and the time. But there's one more setting that I hardly ever see anybody talk about that will guarantee yourself realistic flying, but also good thermal flying, and that's temperature. When you're flying, thermals are heat generated, right? You need heat. Well, look at the temperature of the preset. I don't know where Georg lives, but it's never 74 degrees in July in El Paso, Texas. It's hot. This is the desert. It's hot. Now, I haven't looked up what the temperature today is going to be in Santa Teresa, New Mexico, which is the airport right behind us, but I guarantee you it's going to be warmer. So I'm going to bump the temp. Now, 99 degrees at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, just shy, maybe slightly exaggerating over real. And by the way, that's in the 37 range for you Celsius speakers. So that's not an unrealistic temperature for the desert in West Texas. That's all I'm saying. Those 3 changes, the date, the time, and the temperature, bumping it between 95 and 105, not only will guarantee yourself excellent thermaling conditions, but you're going to have a blast, and it's realistic. Some people, and you can load some conditions that are just literally 10K up everywhere you go. These are not those. These are realistic soaring conditions based on my experience, and I'm okay with that. Let's go flying. So, we're in the Discus 2C, as you can see, and again, this is the free version that doesn't have the FES. So now what are we looking for? We're looking for sharp shadows, sharp and distinct shadows on the ground, such as we see in front of us over here. Now those are 2 good shadows. Now the next thing we want to look at is the darker, heavier clouds above the shadows. Are they dark and heavy? If so, they'll probably be good candidates. Here comes one. Look at that. We have a sharp shadow right over here, right off the nose. We have a sharp shadow and a very heavy, dense cloud. So let's go and find some lift. So if you'll notice that we are going up, we're going to be watching our thermal here, which I'll highlight. What I like to do is when I'm flying, I like to keep an eye on what I call the analog vario. This is the old school variometer that is keeping an eye on the air that's moving up and down outside and independent of our plane. You can notice we're in very slight sync right now. That's nothing major. And that's largely because we're flying at about 69 indicated, 78 real. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the instrumentation, but keep your eye on the variometers here. Of course, our airspeed. We're always going to be watching our airspeed. And then what I call the computed variometer, the LX variometer over here, that's doing all the calculations based on what we're doing and what the air is happening and our airspeed and all that. And it's giving us our true averages based on the calculations. So flying, what are we doing? Between thermals, when we don't have lift, and you can tell we don't have lift over here, you want to fly as fast as you dare. A lot of these glider jockeys love to fly at V&E. Well, I'm not one of those. I just kind of generally putter around. But in general, you want to be able to go faster between thermals than when you're in a thermal. When you find lift, and you notice we're starting to see it now, we're going up at about 3. I like to pull back on the stick, reduce my speed, and try and find it. Now, how did I find this lift? Well, I flew toward the cloud. It's really simple. In Microsoft, especially 2020, the lift of a thermal is modeled on the windward edge or the upwind edge of the cloud. So since I'm flying from the west and I was going downwind to find this cloud that we had identified, it's going to be among the first things that I find. So now notice that with the simple turn to the left, now we're going up at between 5 and 6. You see that over here? So we are doing well. The other thing I want to do is I want to click this second button of the 4 here and give myself the thermal trace. And this is one of my favorite features from the LX navigation system that Gottfriends has put into their gliders. Even this is the LX 9000. They have a manual for it on their website. I'm still flying and we're still going up. Notice that we're over 6,700 feet and we're just flying in a straight line. We're not even thermaling yet. We're going kind of slow, so I'll pick it up. I like to thermal, by the way, with air speeds in this range around the little yellow notch. I don't know what that notch supposed to mean. If you know, I'd love to find out in the comments. But check it out. We're going up at 6 knots, flying at 64, 65 TAS. I'm looking at that in my nav over here, but also on the screen, and we're going up nicely. So now let's try and thermal. We knew we had pretty good lift there, so let's go find it and start to center it. So what we want to do is, and by the way, I have turned my variometer sound off because I know that it's really annoying for a lot of people. I like to fly with the variometer sound on because as soon as I start to hear the chirps, I can then begin my pull back on the stick, pitching upwards so I can slow down and enter the thermal if I need altitude. So that's just me, but I know a lot of people have a problem auditorily with that variometer noise, so I've turned it off for the purpose of this demo. I normally fly with it on. You can see that we're underneath the cloud. You can see that we're right on that downwind or upwind edge of the cloud. And you can see, because of our circle, let me zoom in. I'm using this upper right knob on the Vario to zoom in twice, the LX 9000. And thanks, by the way, to B21, Bravo 21, Ian Lewis. He's the person who has developed all this stuff. He's a fabulous glider designer, and he's given us some fabulous tools for soaring in Flight Simulator. And his videos are must watches on YouTube if you want to learn how to soar better. So I'm trying to keep my speeds in the 60 indicated range, between 55 and 60 indicated. So you'll see me pull down and pull back and push down on the stick because we're trying to stay in the circle, because the next goal is to try and center the thermal. Now, Microsoft doesn't model it perfectly well, but in real life, columns of air are very circular, usually very circular, and the goal is to center the glider in that column of air. And the result would look like a perfectly even string of green pearls going around, with the lift being constant as you circle all the way around the circle. In reality, you're going to find that you your lift it varies based on where you are in the circle, and you have to kind of adjust the circle as you're flying to help you center the flight. There's some great videos on this on YouTube. Just search for circle centering the thermal, and you'll find them. They're based on real life flying. In Microsoft, in Flight Simulator, it's not that big a deal because the thermals are not modeled quite as tightly as real life. So you're just basically trying to find a circle where you can get lift, and you'll find that you can make very wide circles as I'm doing right here. In real life, you want to circle tightly because desert thermals, like the ones that we grew up with or the ones I learned to fly, you're literally canting the wing over as strongly as you can, like this. You don't want to go too fast, but these tight circles similar to this is how you real life thermal. And it can be upsetting to a lot of people. In our soaring club, we'd give demo rides to Air Force officers, and they'd throw up in the airplane. So it can be a little bit challenging. All right, we are still going up. We're coming up on 8,000 feet. Our airport was at 4,000, so we are approximately, well, it'll tell us 4,200 feet AGL. So we are thermaling nicely, folks, and that's how you do it. It's not that hard. Really easy, because on a day like this, with conditions like these, and all I changed were the date, the time, and the temperature, you could soar all day. You can do long distance tasks with these kinds of soaring conditions. Yes, you can build your own weather conditions that are even more ideal, but there's no need to. Download the presets, put them in, install them correctly, then you can use them for any kind of flying. Tweak those 3 things and you'll thermal all day long. It's really not that hard to do. Anyway, Spiral is hoping you enjoyed this video demonstrating thermaling techniques and how you can fly thermals with the best of them in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Like I said, this is 2020, but these techniques work in 2024 as well. You just may not be able to thermal quite as well because of the modeling and all that stuff. Maybe after SU3 it'll get a lot better. Anyway, links to the Discus 2C and these soaring presets are in the description of the video. And I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe if this is useful, and I'll try and give you some more average kind of how to fly a glider stuff, because that's what I love doing in Flight Simulator. And I will see you in the next thermal. Take care, y'all.